Y'all ready to be history?
Get started.
Welcome.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
To the Pro Audio Suite, thanks to RØDE microphones.
These guys are professional. They're motivated.
Introducing Robert Marshall from Source Elements and Someone Audio Post, Chicago. Darren Robbo Robertson from Voodoo Radio Imaging, Sydney. Tech to the VO stars, George the Tech Whittam from LA. And me, Andrew Peters, voiceover talent and home studio guy.
Line up, ladies!
Here we go.
And welcome to a new year and a new Pro Audio Suite podcast. This one we're going to talk about the Source Elements certification. They're doing some tutorials, which both Robbo and I have done, that for the Source Connect standard. We'll talk about that, but before we do, we've both seen a couple of weird tutorials online. One I saw was for a microphone, an ISK, Chinese microphone. It was a dynamic mic, and the guy that was doing it was talking about plosives. He did it with a pop guard and without a pop guard, but it was popping all the way through it, and I don't think he could hear it. It was he's going, see, there's no plosives. And I'm like, yes, there is. They're everywhere. So I don't know what headphones he was listening to.
Did he listen back to it, though? He obviously didn't listen back.
I don't know. If I'd listened back to it, I would have dumped it and not put that one up.
Totally.
Could you see, like, on camera, was he actually wearing headphones?
Yeah, he's wearing headphones in his booth, yeah.
Oh, that's bizarre. I've got one that's sort of the same. It was a guy doing an online tutorial about compression, and he was doing it in Adobe Audition. And in Adobe Audition, you can split the editing screen and you can see the original file on the top. And then on the bottom, while you're setting the parameters, you can actually see what it's going to do to the waveform. It sort of previews the waveform. So he was supposedly teaching voiceover compression, and he was sort of saying, you can see here while I'm playing with the threshold, you can see what it's doing to the transients and blah, blah, blah. And then the other interesting thing to me was he sort of said, look, don't worry about the attack and release times. And then he was sort of going, here's the ratio and you can see what it's doing. He did it all just looking at it and then hit the process button and went, see how great that is. And I went, it sounds very overcompressed to me. So I was kind of watching it going, I don't know how you teach audio engineering visually like that, but it's certainly not the way I would do it, that's for sure.
He probably needs to get on some anti-compressants.
Maybe he does. Maybe he was a bit compressed.
To get that joke in.
Yeah, he did.
First one for 2022.
I'm afraid you'd forgotten about it if you hadn't said it quickly enough.
Yeah. George, when I would imagine when you're setting up stacks for people, you don't have to listen to it, do you? You just look at it and go, "Oh, that looks right."
Oh man, no self-respecting engineer would do anything by numbers and meters.
Right.
They're helpful in guiding you. They're helpful in giving you some visual feedback sometimes if you're trying to figure out if the controls that you're adjusting are actually doing things. But no, I rarely look at any data. I just look at meters to make sure I'm not clipping.
Sure.
I will look at a compression reduction meter to see how much visually I might be compressing in case my ears fool me or something. But yeah, if someone's teaching audio and they're more a visual person, maybe if they're more video editors, I can see how they might use a more visual method to teach an audio medium. You're not going to get good at it. You'll be able to physically, functionally operate the thing, but you're not going to ever be good at it.
Yeah.
Working that way.
Here's a question for you.
You have to train your ears.
And a question without notice, but something that, and it's a little off topic, but something I'd be interested in your thoughts in, is I've been watching a few videos about compression because at the end of last year, I talked about how I got that Slate Digital pack. And I've been looking at some compression tutorial videos because I wanted to get an idea of the compressors that were in the pack and what people were using them for and where people found what compressor most effective and stuff. And I was been watching a few about vocals because part of the reason I wanted some different compressors was to see what I could do with my voiceovers for radio.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, there's people talking about how much they're happy to compress, hearing you talking about the compression meter. Like I sort of tend to go anywhere down to like -7 in terms of how much I'll let it compress in a single compressor. But then there are others that sort of say only -3. Do you have a range, or do you just sort of see each voice is different?
Yeah, it depends on the content. if I'm trying to control an extremely wide dynamic range of a performance, such as in the context of an animation, a really common thing is people are doing animation auditions. So they're doing these characters, and they're all over the place dynamically, right? 30 dB plus, I'd say, dynamic range sometimes. So in those cases, yeah, I am compressing pretty significantly, 10 or more decibels at least, to control that and bring it into a more listenable range. And this isn't for production. This is really so it's just listenable. So like somebody's going to listen to your audition on their laptop speakers or their AirPods. And you just want it to be intelligible, hear the quiet stuff and the loud stuff doesn't blow them out of their headphones. And that's the way I look at it. But I don't know if I would consider that going to finish. And because I don't mix for film or TV, I don't know what's an acceptable dynamic range. You know what I mean? I don't know how much I would get away with compressing. But I'd say in a general rule, if it's narration or commercial, yeah, -3 to -5 dB maybe or 3 to 5 dB of compression or a little more occasionally, but not much on commercials. They're definitely wanting to err on the side of less compression.
Yeah, well, I would imagine
here in the States,
and for TV, especially for TV, because you've got your loudness considerations and all that sort of stuff. If your voice comes in heavily compressed to begin with, you're sort of struggling when you try to put that in place with everything else.
Yeah, you can't go anywhere if it's over compressed already.
That's right.
So
exactly.
Yeah, each thing that you mix for is unique because you don't know. You have to know what's going to happen to the audio after it leaves your studio. What's the mix process? What's the delivery medium? Does it going through another master compressor? If it's for radio, it's going through a crazy, crazy multi-band compressor, right? So you have to know what you're working toward. But have you found some really good? Because for me this year is to teach good content on doing engineering techniques for voice actors. So that is a goal, and learning, teaching compression, teaching EQ, understanding how important the hearing what you're doing is. Have you found some great examples in your time of good tutorials on how to do this stuff?
I have. There is some good stuff around. There's also some rubbish, but there are.
Yeah. We know there's more rubbish than good. Probably,
and to be fair, the good ones that I found are probably more musical in terms of mixing vocals for music. But there's so much you can take from that and put into the voiceover realm that it's really. If you've got a little bit of experience doing stuff for voiceover, you can go, okay, I'll take that and I'll turn that around and do it this way. I mean, I've even just in terms of the Slate Digital stuff I was talking about, there's a 2A copy that Slate are running. I can't think of the name of it, but they were putting that in the chain after one of the other Slate Digital compressors. And I actually wanted to talk about this on another show later this year once I get my head around it. But instead of doing one heavy compress, and this isn't new or groundbreaking, they do a couple of light compressors, but with different attack and release times and all that sort of stuff. And I've actually found it's made a big difference. And the two compressors together just sound magic compared to what I was doing.
It gets real interesting when they start talking about chaining compressors like serial compression and then parallel compression, or you're mixing in the dry and the wet.
Yep. Well, that's the other thing I've changed a lot.
Interesting technique.
Yeah, from watching some vocal videos, is I've changed my parallel compression on my voiceover. Changed the way I think about that. So I mean, as I said, I'm hoping to talk about this a bit later in the year once I get my sort of head around everything. But wow, it's really changing the way I mix. Since just before Christmas when I started down this road, it's really changing the way I think about mixing vocals. Absolutely.
Do you prefer to use a plugin, or would you prefer to use hardware?
I'm happy with the plugins. I don't, it would be great to have a rack full of gear, but let's be honest, you're never going to. Well, I'm certainly never going to afford it. And that's the beauty of plugins and especially this Slate Digital stuff that I've been playing with, I would never be able to buy all those even. The subscription is, I think, $25 US a month, which gives me access to I think it's like $25,000, $30,000 worth of plugins.
Yep.
So, yeah.
And then that's $30,000 worth of plugins that's emulating $300,000
worth of rack gear. That's right. Exactly. Exactly. So, you know, so it's just, look, no, I think I'm happy with plugins, I guess, is the answer, though. I certainly, for the results I'm getting, I'm more than happy.
Well, it's got to be more time efficient than, let's say, I need to rack in and patch in and bring this. I mean, I guess if you have a really well-designed studio where it's very easy to send audio through analog compression, through, you know, a bus. If it's really well designed, it's probably just as seamless. I'm sure a fellow who's, you know, really good at analog processing would tell me that, no, I can do it faster or just as quickly. But for anybody with a practical studio that isn't taking up an entire wing of their home, you know, to be able to just punch it up. And the models are they're so stinking good. There's so many other things in your recording process and your mixing, mastering process that you'll botch up far before your slightly inaccurate model of a specific compressor, you know, is being judged, you know, against the original. It's all in theory. In the real world, you're just trying to get a good sounding result. And that comes down to good engineering technique, good ears, you know, and time.
I think the other thing as an engineer is sort of understanding your weaknesses, because that's always been mine. I've always struggled with voice. You know, I've been fine, you know, getting a mix and all the rest of it. But in terms of getting my voice to sit in my mix and sound like it should be there and it's a part of everything else and not two separate entities, I've always struggled with. And that's sort of part of the reason I went down this path. And the reason I picked up the Slate digital pack was because I'd seen a few videos online and sort of thought, that's worth having a crack at. And so that's how I landed here. But I think that's the other part of being an engineer is understanding your weaknesses and sort of being prepared to go, okay, well, what am I going to change to fix it, rather than, what do they say? If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. So yeah.
I like it, yeah.
Pretty good.
And also the other thing about being using plugins and being you know, in a digital format, you've also got really good recall,
right?
Which you don't necessarily get with analog gear.
Repeatability. You can have presets for different scenarios. You can revisit a project and be right back where you were with a click. And there's just a lot of very practical reasons to go that direction.
Just doesn't look as good.
No, it's not as sexy. You know. I guess you could put some like flat screen monitors inside your racks, so when you look in the rack,
that's a
great
idea.
Laid. Actually, it's so funny. I've never seen anybody actually do that. Like take displays, put them on edge, you know, and just have them laid into the rack. You have digital.
That's very cool.
A digital rack full of digital gear.
Gomez will be listening, going,
It'd be fun to experiment. Yeah, because if you have a desk and you have a producer's workstation, you have all this space. You got to put stuff in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, you know the other New Year's resolution we should make? Stay on topic.
Exactly. Are we going to talk about Source?
Yeah, well, online courses. The reason we got onto this because we were going to talk about. It's a shame Robert's not here, but last night I completed, and Andrew, in the last couple of weeks, you've completed their online training course for Source Connect.
Yeah, just the basic one.
The basic one, yeah. So, and look, you know, without being silly about it, but I guess because I use it regularly, especially for this podcast, there wasn't a lot in there I didn't know. But I can imagine if you were a voiceover artist who does 2 or 3 sessions at home per week, or even less than that, I think there would be a lot of stuff in there that would open your eyes.
What's something that did open your eyes? As you guys, I didn't get to see it yet, but what was there anything, even though you've been using it a while, that
there was like, there was one thing that I think, and we should talk to Robert about this, because I think there was one error. Now, it may not be an error. It may be something that Robert's done with my computer. But one of the questions was, can you have your Source Connect account on 2 separate computers? And the answer is no. But I can. I can have Source Connect standard on my PC and then the B account on my Mac. The only thing that I think may be the issue, and this is where Robert Steps should be here, but the one on my Mac is a Pro and the one on the PC is standard.
Those are 2 different licenses, technically. So that's
Yeah. So that's what I think is the issue. So
desert license. Yeah.
So maybe the question and answer is correct.
Well, the thing for me, that I sort of, it's one of those things where you know what needs to happen, but you don't understand why. The whole port forwarding thing to me was always confusing, and it certainly cleared that up. That really sort of, it was one of those light bulb moments where you went, okay, now I get it. And I'm not going to try to explain it because I'll screw it up, but it cleared that up for me, was that understanding that whole port forwarding thing, which I can imagine would catch a lot of people, especially people who aren't, I'm computer literate to the point that I need to be. But
you might be computer literate and you might be very computer literate, but if you're not Linksys router operating system literate or whatever the brand of router you have, and you don't know how to navigate, through that gauntlet, then you're still going to be stuck because it's not obvious all the time. And every router has its own interface. So that's another thing you have to watch out for. But the ports are interesting. People are still thinking like, why do we have to do this? And I have to remind everybody, well, you know what? Everything you're using on your computer that connects to the internet is using ports. You just don't know, because they're all standardized ports. Web browsing and secure web browsing and email, they all use these standardized ports that are built in to this infrastructure of the internet. But then there's a tremendous amount of software and games too that aren't already predetermined and pre-configured. And that's why we have to do it, to get those connections to work reliably. But I'm looking forward to doing it too. I want to do both the standard and the pro, because while I never or almost never have to use it, I would certainly like to know more about it and be able to support more people that might be using it.
I was going to say, it'd have to be helpful for you, surely.
I mean, I got certified many years ago on an older version, but I would love to go through their new course and feel it out. Because,
maybe we should all hit up Robert for a pro Source Connect's pro course and do it in the next couple of weeks, and then do a whole episode on it.
Yeah.
You're talking way out of my league.
Well, you'll do it. Of course you will.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah. It's interesting though, because I got through the course, passed, that's fine, got the certificate and everything. But I guarantee if you ask me a question about port forwarding, I would probably fail.
Yeah, but that just comes with practice now.
Yeah, and that's the problem. You get your certificate, but if you're not doing it every day, you're going to forget, and that's the problem. And the other thing that I thought was really interesting, which we've discussed before we got on today, was a friend of mine, Pip, who I've talked about before, who's got a studio in Melbourne called Windmill. He lives close to me, so he's got a setup at home as well. So when he's not in town, he can work out of his home setup. But he had a session. He had 2 actors for this session. So one actor was local here. He came to my studio, and then the other actor was at his Melbourne studio. So we connected via Source Connect. And I said to Pip, have you got your engineer in Melbourne to set up Q Manager? And he said, no, what's Q Manager? Now, he runs ProX. So, and it was kind of weird. Not that he should know about Q Manager necessarily, but I'm surprised he didn't, having ProX, and didn't understand what Q Manager does. Because after we'd finished the session, I explained what Q Manager does, and he's like, we should be definitely using Q Manager.
Yeah, sure. I think this certification thing is going to really help educate people about features that they have that they didn't even know they had. It's such a paradigm shift from what I think a lot of engineers who are using Source Connect today are probably using it because they were using ISDN yesterday. So they're just thinking of it as it's just another ISDN. They don't have any more expectations beyond that. And that's what it does. It just connects me to the studio and that's it. And so they don't even conceptualize what a Q Manager would do and why you would even care. Because it's just totally a new concept. So it's a lot of it's just education, and the more we talk about it, the more people will think about it and try using it.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the issues with the other, means of connecting, like, I won't mention any names, but we all know that other people use other systems to connect studios. But I think one of the issues with Source Elements or Source Connect is that a lot of people don't know about the features. And if they did know about the features and what it actually does, they probably wouldn't be going elsewhere to do the same job. And I'm not sort of being all sort of, fanboy of Source Elements or anything.
No. The one that I learned only at the end of last year when we did the Mary Lynn Wisner episode that blew my hair back was we were talking about a file that I'd had problems with from the previous record to that one. And Robert said, well, open your queue manager. George, have you got your queue manager open? Yes. Robbo, go into queue manager, do this. And bang, I could still restore the file.
Yeah.
And that was 2 weeks after the session. That's crazy. Do that with ISDN.
Yeah, exactly. Or anything else for that matter.
That's right.
No,
exactly.
I do, their Source Elements is graciously sponsors of VOBS too, right? And they have been for years. And every episode, I improvise an ad. I just talk about Source Connect. And this is what I talked about the last episode. I talked about this queue manager thing because nobody knows about it. not in my world anyway.
Yeah.
So the more we talk about it, the more people will become aware of it and understand how it's yet another differentiator among many other things. It's another major differentiator from the ones that run on web browsers like Chrome. It doesn't mean they couldn't eventually emulate it. I'm sure there's ways they could do the same on, but just Source Connect's been doing it for a very long time, and the workflow makes it very painless for the producer, the engineer who's actually running the session.
There's so much you don't have to think about. Yeah. That's right. Exactly.
You have to think about to get it set up. But once it's operating, like any good studio, all the work is getting it set up. Once the session's running, it's a pleasure.
Look, I spoken about this before. This program gets recorded on a Pro Tools template in my system, and Robert had a big input on that. He helped me set that up. I did have one, and Robert sort of went, I think there's a better way for you to do it. And so he helped me set it up. And as soon as I watched him do it, because he logged in and did it, as soon as I was watching him do it, I went, God, that makes so much sense. But, what I'm saying is that process took, over a couple of days, probably took 4 or 5 hours to set up a template. But now I open up a Pro Tools session, I open up my Source Connect connections, and I open up Source Connect now, which is what we use to monitor each other because of the latency. And I'm ready to go. 5 minutes, and I've got a session that has sometimes up to 4 Source Connect connections, a Source Connect Now connection. You could still throw in a telephone connection or a Zoom connection, plus me, plus a couple of backups running. It takes 5 minutes to open up a session and open up everything, and I'm right to go. So,
is it all using Nexus?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Nexus is the hub of all that. Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's just brilliant. It's, anyone who is doing this sort of thing regularly to sort of go down the track of having to open it up and start from scratch every time, you're killing yourself.
And you could do that in Logic. You could do that in Nuendo. You could do that in Cubase. You could do that
of course.
Any multi-track DAW, essentially.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, Robert, you owe us some money. We've just done a massive big advertorial for you.
You just paid him back for setting up your system, I guess.
There you go. That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. I got the privilege of watching the master at work at the same time.
Yeah, there's something going on with that brain of Robert.
I don't know what it is, but there's something going on. You're right.
Yeah, there's something to be said for eating pizza and smoking pot.
Well, that was fun. Is it over?
The Pro Audio Suite recorded using RØDE NTG5s and Source Connect. Edited by Andrew Peters and mixed by Voodoo Radio Imaging.
With tech support from George the Tech Witter.
Help us share the show with more people and get your hands on exclusive content by contributing to our Patreon page.
See patreon.com/Pro Audio Suite.
Don't forget to subscribe to the show and join in the conversation on our Facebook group. To leave a comment, suggest a topic, or just say g'day, drop us a note at our website.
ProAudioSuite.com.